Good evening, everyone. Today I am going to talk about the social problems caused by war, more specifically, the effects of armed conflicts on the children's education. The presentation explores many impacts of the armed conflicts on children's education, they may encourage as well as they may encouraging strategies and practices utilized to meet the needs of the children in such circumstances. The presentation examines the impact of the armed conflict at the family level, the community level, and the local level, the national level, and finally at the international level. Now, more specifically examines the seemingly endless negative effects of armed conflict on children's education and possible strategies to counter the said negative effects. Okay. Now going on, why have I concentrated on education during war? Although wars and emergencies share many commonalities, one facet remains constant, that is the devastating effects it bestows upon children and their right to education. Oftentimes, children are forced to bear the majority of the negative fallouts of the wars and emergencies, and as a result of armed conflict, millions of children are killed, injured, or internally or externally displaced from their houses. Consequently, many children spend their entire childhood in camps or other temporary shelters. Sommers, a specialist, an international lawyer in this area, has stated that most primary school children in war-affected areas are not in school and have no realistic hope of enrolling in one. My submission is that it is during time of armed conflict that education is just as important, if not more, than during times of peace. Emergency education provides both social and physical protection for children and also lessens the psychological impact of war on children. Now, out of school, one is exposed to all manners of peril, and the same peril that the grown-ups face, and one must face these perils alone. In school, however, a child can sit and play and can spend time with other children and do not have to do any of the labor that comes outside the schoolhouse walls. One's only job in school is to learn. Children in a school socialize, and therefore, when they feel like a part of community, and that is the feeling of community is scarce during war. Therefore, when the children are being educated, they have the feeling that they are a part of the community, and therefore they do not share much of the burden and are not affected and are not mentally and physically traumatized. Now, schooling is crucial for teaching children survival skills. Schooling is survival skills that can help protect themselves and their families from potential harms such as health and hygiene information. Examples are given such as HIV or AIDS, sexually transmitted diseases, cholera, etc., and landmine identification. Pilar Aguilar of the UNICEF and Gonzalo Retimal in a combined paper have stated that education serves to normalize the situation by establishing routines, thereby decreasing the psychosocial stress, addressing the most immediate needs, and preparing for a better post-emergency society. Providing education and during times of armed conflict is also noted for restoring a sense of continuity, security, and normality in a child's life. International laws and conventions, such as the Convention on the Rights of Child, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Child, and the International Labour Organization or Convention on the Worst Forms of Child Labour forbid the use of children in armed conflict and supports the role of education in children's lives. This presentation is just I consider this presentation as an introduction into the daunting impacts of the armed conflicts on the children's education, and the strategies and the practices that are needed to meet the needs of children in such circumstances. The impact of armed conflict on children is both far-reaching and complex. Children are more vulnerable to the impacts of armed conflict because they are still forming identities about themselves and their places within their families, the community, and the world in general at the young age. When social networks such as the family, the community, and social services break down, education is considered not to be a priority. Physical impacts of the armed conflict at the local level also break down are also break down the structure and are far more obvious because of stuff such as the destruction of school infrastructure. At the national level, the government struggle to maintain a system that is often underfunded and understaffed during war. When you take it to the international level, the neighboring countries struggle to accommodate the influx of refugees as seen in this current Syria scenario, and the NGOs attempt to coordinate their efforts, and international donors hinder emergency educational responses by earmarking the funding for emergency responses such as medical aid and food or water, though they are more important. Though food, water and safety are more, medical aid are more important, education should, my submission is that education should be given equal importance to this. When there is armed conflict, the conflict consumes the community. When the armed conflict consumes the community of children, they are torn from their families and displaced or even abandoned after war. They are as a consequence, children become more susceptible to economic and or sexual exploitation and abduction or recruitment into government, militia or rebel forces. These governments are let me take a case study of Nepal between the time duration of January to August 2005, where more than 11,800 students were abducted from rural schools for forced recruitment into the militia. In situations of prolonged armed conflicts, parents are hesitant to permit children to attend schools as the risk of dangers of attack, abduction or falling victim to landmines are very high. At the same time, the children's role within the family and community also changes during the conflict, and these children are forced to become the heads of the family when either of the parents are injured, killed or simply cannot be located. These children may also be forced to work to contribute to the family's income. Having to endure such challenges children, especially child soldiers, both boys and girls, experience long-term psychological trauma even after the stoppage of the armed conflict. It is not uncommon for teachers and children to become deliberate targets in armed conflicts. Teachers become targets because they are seen as government employees and therefore important community members. 60% of the teachers in Rwanda during the conflict were either fled the country or were killed. When replacement teachers are found, they are often unqualified and are underpaid. Now, how does the it has been what are the potential problems? It has been noted that due to highly politicized nature of the internal ethnic armed conflicts, the legitimacy of education often comes under scrutiny. Governments and rebel forces may try to control the education system to indoctrinate students by developing their own bias skewed curriculum. Using the said curriculum contributes to stereotyping of different groups and creates social tensions in attempt to justify the inequalities. This is particularly worrisome because schools are often battlegrounds for the hearts and minds of the next generation. Unequal access to education can also contribute to armed conflicts, as was the case in Rwanda genocide and the conflict in Kosovo. Now, what should be done? The solution is, when implementing educational strategies and practices to meet the needs of the children affected by armed conflict, a holistic approach is needed. By incorporating all stakeholders, that is the children, the parents, the community members, the leaders and the leaders of the community, the national government, international NGOs and the local NGOs, the foreign governments that are in development and implementation of educational programs for the children affected by armed conflict, implementation of armed conflict can lead to a development of education during war. Education occupies a vital role in a post-armed conflict, as it does before and during armed conflict. Dunson, in his paper and his presentation during the convention on the rights of child during war states that teaching and learning are participatory, and creative teachers should partner with parents and the wider community. Programs educating children and parents children, parents, and communities affected by armed conflict not only heal the harm caused by the conflict but also contribute to the prevention of further occurrences. Education. Okay, and as stated by UNESCO in its study, what future does a country have if youth is robbed of knowledge and the tools need to rebuild it? Now, before completing, I would like to state state about the importance of vocational education and training to be as equally important as formal education, because armed education cripples most economies, and as such employment is difficult to obtain. Families struggling to meet ends meet often rely on children to contribute. This issue can be addressed by helping the children learn a vocation. Example, in agriculture, animal husbandry, baking, carpentry, crafting, masonry, mechanics are some of the other trades allow the children to contribute to their families and can even earn a living for themselves. However, this vocational training must be incorporated into a larger educational plan. In El Salvador, for example, the experience with vocational training was not very encouraging. Only 25% of the children became involved in the trade for which they were trained. To make the most of these programs, a complex labor market analysis should help determine what is the best vocation for the country or the area where the armed conflict is taking place. As such, clearly education occupies a vital role in a post-armed conflict, and as a vehicle to enabling personal growth, education contributes to economic and social development of a nation. To complete, I would like to quote Narayan, who has stated, in emergency situations, it is essential in assisting children to deal with their future more confidently and effectively, and can be instrumental in making it possible for them to develop a peaceful society. Thank you.